Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to start by reading your bio. So thanks so much. We have Linda Keeling joining us today. Linda is a professor of animal welfare at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. She manages an active research group in the area of animal behaviour and welfare, and she's also the coordinator of the Centre of Excellence for Animal Welfare Science. Her research is in the area of animal welfare and mainly agricultural, companion and sports animals, so quite diverse the range of species that she works with. She researches areas that are fundamental to animal welfare, things like ethology or animal behaviour, and then through to applied questions around the effect of housing and management and on developing welfare assessment methodologies. Her current research involves investigating emotional states in animals and the effect of early experience on later behaviour and welfare. Her broad experience within animal welfare science means that she is active in the multidisciplinary projects and also has a science-based animal welfare and also in science-based animal welfare policy development. So it's a real pleasure to have you here with us today, Linda. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I should mention as well that you are a member of our Animal Welfare Action Network. So it's nice to have an insider as well. So thank you. And I guess to get started with, I wanted to ask you the big question about what you think the role of animal welfare is in the SDGs and how you think that connects.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Yes, of course. Animal welfare and animal health affect the use of antibiotics in food production and therefore the development of antimicrobial resistance. And animals that live under poor conditions become stressed. They can suffer from as well as spread infectious diseases. And the use of antibiotics will increase. And with that, the antibiotic resistance will increase. So really anything that improves animal welfare is going to help. So animal welfare has a very important role in both the SDGs and in antimicrobial stewardship.
Yeah, that's good. Do you have any practical examples from your research that you wanted to share, or things that you've read?
Well, if you want me to expand a little, I did send you a slide earlier that if we can put up, where I want to discuss a little bit more of the links between animal welfare and the SDGs. And
is that
probably
the right slide that I have up?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just to confirm. Great.
Yes, it is the correct slide. And from what I've just said about antimicrobial stewardship, you can probably understand why the most obvious link is to SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. The responsible and restrictive use of antimicrobial requires good animal welfare, but also it minimizes the development of antimicrobial resistance. So there's the triad, the animal welfare, the SDG, and the antimicrobial stewardship that you're asking about here. But of course, there are other SDGs here, and I put up two others. One also that people might think is quite an obvious one, SDG 3. That's the one for good health and well-being. As people know, this refers to humans mainly and to human health, but good animal welfare increases the animals' immune competence and their resistance to zoonotic diseases. So good animal welfare increases their immune competence and resistance to these zoonotic diseases that can be transferred to humans. Actually, I found some figures recently, and they said that the WHO estimated that around 60% of all diseases affecting people and around 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic diseases. And this is why I'm talking to you here from home today. So obviously there's a link there to SDG 3 and to human health. But I put up this last one here because there are also some links, maybe unexpected links to SDGs. And here I put up SDG 16, the Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions SDG. Improved governance of veterinary services and competent authorities, they can guide and enforce good animal welfare policies. So even if that might not have come up first in your mind when you're thinking about animal welfare, SDGs, antimicrobial stewardship, when you think about it, yes, of course, these are important organizations. So this is just 3 examples, but as I said at the beginning, anything that really improves animal welfare is going to be important in achieving SDGs and reducing antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, thank you for those 3 examples. They're really powerful. I know as well that you've published some research looking at the connections between animal welfare and the SDGs. Is that something that you'd be able to share with us now?
Yes. People are going to realize that was a little bit of a leading question because I just happen to have a slide prepared for that. So what I want to say with this slide here is that looking at animal welfare and the SDGs in action, then it's going to work best when the synergies are strongest, since that's when it's easiest to get all people to work together and then everybody benefits. And this is a slide of some research that we did where we asked people to rate the strength of the links between animal welfare and the SDG goals. So for those of you who can't see it here, we have on the x-axis, we have the link on improving and how much the improving animal welfare will impact on achieving the SDGs. And on the y-axis, you have the reverse, that's achieving SDGs, and that impact on how achieving SDGs will impact on improving animal welfare. And what people can see here is a number of dots, where each dot is one of the SDGs. And up on the top right-hand corner, that's where you have the most win-win effects. That's SDG 12, the one we talked about before, responsible consumption and production, which is not surprising. And it's also in the area of primary production that there are a lot of good examples. Those in like community conversations in developing countries, but also the work in Europe and North America as well, and others in improving housing conditions for animals. And it's not just us. We were a small group of people here doing this or rating at a workshop, but I mean the bigger organizations like Committee on World Food Security talks about supporting animal health and welfare to sustainably increase productivity. And food security is probably an issue that some of the other speakers are going to take up with you, or maybe have already taken up.
Yes.
But generally speaking, most people agree that animal welfare is good business sense. It's one of these win-win situations again. So in developing countries, you have things like capacity building. Improving animal welfare can mean that animals come closer to producing up to their genetic potential. And consumer demand for products with improved animal welfare. That's why we have such an increase in certification schemes. Mm-hmm. So that was why sort of maybe it's not surprising that the SDG 12 is up on the top here, but you can also see that there's SDG 14 there, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land. These are also clear win-win situations. And these two, 14 and 15, are the biodiversity goals. Sometimes they're called that. And there are lots of examples between animal protection and protecting ecosystems. And a lot of work going in those areas as well. And then there are other ones, as I said, that maybe you don't think about, like SDG 8, which is the decent work and economic growth. So whether it's being able to take your pet to work increases your job satisfaction or your productivity, or whether it's about economic growth, as you said, good animal welfare can be good business. Or working equids, which I think is one of the speakers as well, and we'll talk about that more. Good welfare can increase the productivity when you're working together with your animal. And then, of course, we have this with the SDG 3 again, the human health that we've already talked about. But we can add on to this ones about animal abuse linked with personal abuse, animal-assisted therapy. I mean, so it's up there on these win-win situations. There are many examples that maybe don't first come to mind, but the moment you stop and think, you'll see that they're all there, that animals are such an important part. I mean, we share our planet with animals.
Can I ask about that I think that those win-wins are so clear, and it's nice that they've shown up so strongly in your research. Can I ask about the times where any trade-offs between improving animal welfare improving animal welfare came into conflict with any of the SDGs? Was that ever the case, or was it more that it just wasn't as strongly aligned?
these dots are the average of a group of 12 people, researchers in the area that voted. And there is variation, of course, around these. So these are the average that's the win-win. And what we found and what we've been exploring a little bit since then is what context the person was thinking about when they were giving their voting. So some person may have been thinking about a dog in Sweden, and somebody may have been thinking about a donkey in Ethiopia, and somebody may have been thinking about a pig in North America. And then depending on which SDG and which example, sometimes there's a trade-off and sometimes there's a positive one. So I think it's quite important to go in, and one of the next steps that we want to do is to go in a little bit more detail here and look at the different sub-goals, the tasks under here, and make them more context specific. Because of course it's easier to make progress if you choose those examples where there's win-win, and you can look at those where there are trade-offs and say, and okay, how can we handle that? So I think when we come to making policy types of decisions, we really do need to look to be context specific.
That's great, and thank you for sharing some of your future research plans. I guess then to kind of wrap this up, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about, a vision that you have for animal welfare in the future and how it will connect to these big challenges of SDGs and antimicrobial stewardship.
Well, I think the role is becoming much clearer than it was even a few years ago. People are realizing that even if animals are hardly mentioned, for example, there's no specific animal health or well-being goal. Some people talk about an 18th SDG. Animals are there explicitly, and they have a big role in achieving the whole of the 2030 agenda. Sometimes I think we work a little bit too specialized. I'm specialized in my research area and others are, and we need to work much more together and get a more integrated view. We need to understand each other's terminology and languages. So I think one of the big things for the future is incorporating animal welfare into contemporary understanding of sustainable development. We need to be integrating knowledge from these two areas and working together rather than working in these separate silos. And that's one of the very good things that I think about this whole agenda, that it lifts up how everything is integrated and how we must work in all these different areas. So I think animal welfare has to become more mainstream. Yeah, then if you want something else, there's the one welfare approach that I should lift up and mention, but I'm sure somebody else will do about that.
Thanks so much, Linda. That's fantastic. We really appreciate the thoughts, and it's a really strong note to finish on. Alongside with, at the end of this webinar, we'll also be able to share your contact details if anyone wants to get in touch with you through SLU, as well as the slides that you've made available will be, and this recording. And then too, we can put a link to that paper that you mentioned, because it's a really interesting one too. So thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this initiative. I think the Animal Welfare Action Network is important in increasing awareness about the role of animals and animal welfare in sustainable development, and this link with the antimicrobial resistance. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much.